right, we're so excited for today. We have Dr. Marni Feuerman, our good friend and internationally renowned psychotherapist who specializes in relationships and is often consulted by the media, all the outlets you know, HuffPost, Ask.com, Psychology Today, Self Magazine, USA Today. I mean, she's everywhere and she knows her stuff. She has a private practice in Boca Raton, Florida, but again, is all over the world for her knowledge and efforts. And we're very excited to have her today to dig into a topic that is near and dear to my heart: how to break free from loving the emotionally unavailable man. Now, of course, I just want to give a little caveat that emotionally unavailable partners come in all genders, sexual identifications, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of emotionally unavailable men out there, and there's a reason for this, which I'm going to start by asking you, Marni. So we're going to focus in on that in particular, but of course this may apply to you no matter who you are and how your partner identifies. So with that said, Marni, welcome, first of all. Thanks for being here.
So great to be here. Thank you both.
We're excited to have you. And of course, you wrote a whole book on this called Ghosted and Breadcrumbed. And tell me the subtitle again.
Yeah, it's Stop Falling for Unavailable Men and Get Smart About Healthy Relationships.
Yes. Amen to that. Okay, so maybe you could start by telling us, what does this look like? What constitutes, what are some of the hallmarks of an emotionally unavailable man or partner?
Yeah, so very broadly, I'm talking about a man who puts up barriers to intimacy. Sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they're unintentional, because people are doing this sometimes and they don't realize they're doing this. And there could be a whole lot of reasons why, but they are pulling away from emotional intimacy. They're not moving towards it. They're not moving towards that or vulnerability in a romantic relationship. And so that is loosely the definition of unavailability.
Yeah. And you talk about married men that are dating out there, and like you're the other woman to a married man. What are all the versions of the unavailable man?
Yeah, I include that. I don't think there's a whole lot of resources out there for women who are in a relationship with somebody who isn't available because they are married to somebody else. But it does happen. And in fact, that is what sparked the idea for the book, because I write a lot of blogs and articles, as you know, and one that got a lot of attention, a lot of views, a lot of shares was one about how to walk away from a relationship with a married man. So obviously geared towards women. And so I thought, oh my gosh, like there must be a need. There must be an audience out there of people who are desperate for some resources, who find themselves in this situation. And I learned certainly a whole lot about, and we could do almost a separate show just on that, about what I learned about women who do become involved, become what's called the affair partner. And also, a lot about some of the men and about this situation and circumstance. And so it's quite sad because women are often fed information, or they're told and made promises by these men. And so their lives are just passing them by because they're waiting and waiting. And of course, they feel like they're in love. They believe it's love, and they're finding that their hopes and their dreams are pretty much crushed at some point. So it's not a good situation. But yes, I do talk extensively about being involved with somebody married as well in this book.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of that too, because I think there's so much stigma and shame around that nobody wants to raise their hand and say, yeah, that's me and I need help with that. But it does go on quite a bit. Yes. And so there are these different iterations of how being in an emotionally unavailable relationship, or being in a relationship with someone who is emotionally unavailable, can look. There's the version of, you're with someone who's unavailable because they're married to someone else, which in and of itself means they can't possibly be available to you. And the fact that they're emotionally unavailable may be a big part of why they're in this bifurcated relationship stance, because somebody who deals with their problems constructively and directly is usually not seeking, and is available for true intimacy, is usually not seeking to maintain multiple relationships at the same time. But I want to back up even farther for a second into, of course, there's the dating part. And maybe let's start with that for a minute.
Sure.
Maybe you can even get into, a lot of people may know, but ghosted and breadcrumb, give us a definition for that, because some of this begins in dating. And I've got to tell you, I have a long history of dating emotionally unavailable men. And, I never was looking for it. The warning signs were not super obvious. A lot of times these men can show up seemingly very intensely connected at the beginning. They feign vulnerability, right? When it's not really requiring true intimacy. So it feels very connected. They're in hot pursuit. They're often alpha males. They're successful. They're charming. They know how to treat a woman. They say the right things. I never in my life thought, let me go find an emotionally unavailable man. I can't wait to be tortured for the next 3 years. So let's talk about what this can look like in dating. And then maybe you can give our listeners a definition for both ghosted and breadcrumb, because those are two hot terms.
Yeah. So ghosting and being ghosted, we know has been around for quite a while and is probably the most popular of these dating terms that kind of came out to describe some of these unfortunate dating experiences. And so ghosting is just when someone disappears on you without any explanation and no communication. And some of what I found when I was researching for the book is that it really leaves people feeling just awful. It's the unknown. It's a lot of confusion, not having something that, even if it's just, hey, I don't see a future, or the chemistry wasn't there for me, something simple that a person can just offer that person they were dating is so, so helpful. So a lot of people are not getting that. They're not even getting anything, even if after they have a date where they feel like they had a really wonderful time. And like you're saying, they might be feeling chemistry and the conversation flowed really well. Ghosting is really a terrible habit, unless, certainly there's caveats to these things. Like if you felt like someone was dangerous and, there was some risk to you, go ahead and ghost. But I would say 99% of the circumstances, just kind of wrap it up and just say something so that the person knows, get some small explanation of what happened.
And why do people ghost, Marni, while we're on this? You explain it in the book, and I think it's really important for people to understand this. Not that there's ever an excuse.
Right. I think people are just very intimidated by such direct communication. And unfortunately, that's not getting a whole lot better with the generation raised on technology, and a lot is through texting and things like that. So it's just easier to just ghost. So I think a lot can get in the way of just assertive communication for people. So this, of course, goes for both men and women. And I know you're writing so much on this topic, so I'd love to talk more with you about it. But I think there's reasons someone just gets in their own way. It's kind of they're tripping over themselves when
it's uncomfortable to sit and tell someone.
It is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're rejecting somebody.
Right.
And when you're going to do that, people will just avoid. They'll avoid that.
But you cause far more pain. Now, it's one thing to, at the end of a date, or a date didn't go well, to just ghost someone. I mean, that's cruel enough. And in fact, because I was once ghosted by somebody I was actually dating, he met another woman on a plane and never called me again. And because this wasn't my first rodeo with his bullshit, I just was at a point that even though it was so uncertain, I was like, you know what? I'm just done. Whatever the explanation is, I don't give a fuck. And I'm not contacting him ever again.
Right. And what I would love for people to do is just not take it personally. But that is a lot of what people do. That's exactly what they think. It's me that they weren't worth the conversation. So it does leave people in a pretty bad spot.
But very often it's like the intimacy is heating up for that person.
Yeah.
They're having to be accountable and having to lean close into that relationship. Maybe they've made promises that they don't really intend to actually make real. And so in that point, they exit in a really confusing way, right? Colette, is that what you're like basically describing?
Yeah. And I think for me personally, I didn't take it personally. However, I agree that oftentimes people do, but I will say that what it does to your nervous system to have a connection with someone, and in my case, there was a whole relationship that had gone on, and this was like a time we had gotten back together, to go from that just on an attachment level in your limbic system, your emotional nervous system, which you guys all know, but for our listeners, to go from that to just being left with no closure, no explanation, not even the respect of like goodbye is so awful to do to some. So even if this is a reflection of this person and their effed upness, their lack of capacity, it's
a
really
very bad sign.
Terrible thing to do to somebody. Right. And in the years since I was ghosted, I mean, it's 15 years ago. I much later, had a repair conversation with this person who took accountability, acknowledged we're friends. My husband knows him, and he has continued this behavior with other women despite his contrition toward me. So, and if he's listening, sorry, buddy, I love you, but it's really messed up to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. But there's other terms that you say in your book. So there's breadcrumb. And then what is the one that you talked about? And I want to hear the definition of breadcrumb, but also the one where like a man just does not like introduce you to people in his life.
Yeah. So two different things here, but maybe they're certainly like not introducing you to people in their life is maybe a form of breadcrumbing, absolutely. But breadcrumbing is like stringing somebody along. So you're giving them a little bit, just enough to keep them involved, but you're really not fully engaging. And so you might be doing things like not introducing them to people that are important to you, especially after enough time has gone by where that, the relationship should develop into that. It's almost like they're keeping their options open in case somebody better comes along, and you can kind of feel it. They're not so consistent with going out, or they'll say, hey, I'll call you Friday. And then Friday comes and you don't hear from them. And so those are all breadcrumbing type behavior, which of course is extremely frustrating.
And I think it's so common in dating. I hear my daughters talking about this in dating, that it's so common in the younger generation when they just want to have a bunch of people like on the rotation. And I think some people are quite addicted to the supply of this, feeling like there's somebody that when I feel like it, I can say, hey, like, what's up? And somebody will ping me back. And then I hear
roster.
Right. And then I hear it at Midlife, like Bethany Frankel, who, is this famous television personality. I saw a video where she said dating people in their 50s is like these people want a pen pal. They want to like text you, but they never want to meet or engage or develop anything. They just want something to keep them from boredom and feeling totally alone.
Right. Right. And of course, the people doing that are not emotionally available, of course.
So if this happens, it's a really good early warning sign. Like one time somebody is not consistent, fine. But if somebody is not consistent more than one time, it's a major flag, right?
Yeah. What I always emphasize to people is these one-off things, I don't know how much people want to put into that, but I think if it's a pattern, right, you're seeing repetitive behavior, a pattern of behavior, some bad sign consistently, that's when you really want to say, hey, this is not good. This is a red flag. I really need to consider if this is what I want, or do I want to actually have a conversation about it to see what's going on?
Right.
Because for the record, like, can we just say for the woman who's listening, who maybe has been through a lot of this, like, how should it go? I know not all relationships unfold the same way, but there should be certain things that are working, right? Like, how are things supposed to unfold?
I think slowly and gradually, but you should see pretty consistent behavior. If someone says, I'm calling you on Friday, and they don't call you on Friday, that's not consistent. So that their words, their actions line up and match up.
Yeah.
They're not overdoing it and love bombing, but they're also not playing like coy and, never pursuing. So it's probably looking pretty balanced. It's somewhere in the middle. You're taking time to get to know them. They're getting to know you. It just feels like, I almost look at it like an inverse triangle, right? Where it's very narrow at the bottom, but then as time goes on, it's getting wider and wider. And so the depth of the relationship is getting a little bit deeper as you go along.
It's a great way to describe it, Marni.
I love that. And they're pulling you into their lives, right? They want you to meet their friends. They want you to meet their family. They want you to be a part of the things they care about. That's like a natural unfolding.
Yeah, they're taking risks and asking you and saying like, hey, this may feel too soon. So if you won't say no, it's okay. But look, I'm having this party at my house. Would love to have you there. But a few of my friends and even my cousin's going to be there. Will you come? So they can introduce it that way in a very disarming, casual kind of way where they're not like, it's not overkill in how they're, wanting to include that person in their life.
Right. And again, I just want to say that first of all, I love the inverse triangle, right? And a lot of people, what I wanted to say again is that with some of these people, what's so tricky about some emotionally unavailable men is that the triangle starts out the other way. There's so much love bombing. There's so much interest. There's so much fire that you just feel like, oh my gosh, this person is as excited about me as I am about them. And if you feel chemistry for them, it feels great. It just feels reciprocal. But then in time, instead of it deepening, which first of all, it's a flag in and of itself. Of course, most of us now know love bombing. But in time, they actually pull away more rather than deepening the relationship. And this is why I think looking for somebody who is consistent is so important, because it can be so confusing to really identify the emotionally unavailable person. I love that you quoted this, Marni, in your book. And this is what helped me start to shift out of dating emotionally unavailable people when I was single, after my divorce in my 30s. So not doing this as a kid, not having dated really anyone new since high school. I didn't know what I was doing. So if you were telling me you love me and I'm great, I'm believing you. And a friend finally bought me the now legendary book, He's Just Not That Into You. And I think there's still, and you quote it in your book, and I think there's still some truth to this, that one of the things that I learned to sit with is if in my gut, like love should feel like a gradual building. And in my gut, if I'm confused, if I'm up and I'm down, if I don't know when you're going to call or text, if I'm questioning if you like me, if I'm making excuses, then not only are you just not that into me, you're not emotionally available, and it's time to cut and put my energy elsewhere. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, some of these circumstances are really innocent. So sometimes somebody is emotionally unavailable because they've got some kind of crisis in their life, or they just learned a family member is ill, or they just switched jobs, or they just don't have bandwidth at that moment. It could be a perfectly good person, but the timing is off. And so that's possible too. So I just want people to know, just because we're saying emotionally unavailable, there are multiple reasons. Some of them are a little more like nefarious, and some are pretty innocent, and it runs the range. But people, you've got to respond, right? You've got to respond to like what you're getting, not trying harder. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make. They think if I just change myself, twist myself into this pretzel, if I just, look prettier or do whatever, they're kind of lying to themselves about what they need to do, when you just have to be honest about the situation and the circumstance. You're getting an accurate read on it, and you're saying, all right, this is what it is. This person's they're not pursuing me, or they're not really showing interest, or they keep backing off. not for me.
So how do you help women with this? Like, I mean, when you have a woman coming to you and like describing these situations, but he did this, but he didn't do that. And, I don't know how to read it. Like, how do you help a woman begin to like sort of confront the truth of an emotionally unavailable guy?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I think there's a lot of complexity around that depending on the person. This could be a much deeper therapeutic issue, or it could just be a little more of like a surface strategy kind of issue for somebody. So I think it's about asking the right questions, getting all the information, getting some background and context for the person. I want to make sure there's not some things that are perhaps playing out that have happened in their early childhood. So there's some pattern playing out. Maybe they had one parent that was very emotionally unavailable, or an alcoholic, or just traveled for work all the time and they were just never around, whatever the reason. I want people to connect some dots around that and around their history. Or if they've had something happen to them in their life that's been traumatic, or, divorce, or, maybe they had a long-term relationship that was also really bad or abusive and they're just coming out of that. So I want to get a lot of information about the backstory and the different circumstances. And then that will help me kind of carve out like, okay, here's where we need to go. Here are some goals that we need to work on. And that might be a place to start.
Yeah. Okay. And so you talked a lot about, family of origin patterns, why women might be drawn to this, being willing to look at your own patterns, not in a shaming way or not having grace for yourself, just trying to understand why when this shows up, because we can all find that we're being drawn to somebody who's emotionally unavailable. But the difference is maybe when you discover it, some people say, okay, no thanks. And other people try harder. And, that was certainly me when I was young. I would just like, okay, well, what do I have to do to get your attention? And I related to a lot of the stories in your book about women who grew up in families of divorce. My parents got divorced. I didn't really see secure attachment modeled after a certain age. And I also witnessed a lot of like fighting and chaos. And so there was a lot I related to there. And I think that is why when people want to go to a therapist, they need to unpack those patterns and try to understand themselves. But can you also help the listener understand why some of these men, I think there are a couple of reasons, but I'd love to hear what you think is most important. You said it runs the gamut. Why are so many men emotionally unavailable? Big question.
Well, right. Well, in part, they have their family of origin or attachment history as well. Could have been early established patterns in their lives that have contributed to them being less emotionally available. I also think a big piece of it is how men are socialized. Yeah. We know women are socialized quite differently. So for men, we don't usually help them enough, certainly, with articulating and naming their feelings, or honoring their feelings and giving them space to express them. I think men are socialized more to be, achieving and action-oriented and goal-oriented and productive, and not as much relational, a little more competitive. So those things, I think, contribute. And so they get into an adult romantic relationship with a woman and they don't feel like they're up to par enough, or they're not articulating their emotions, or they're not empathic, and I do think in some ways, certainly this could be what's going on between the couple. I know that I've certainly met some women who their expectation is like through the roof with that, and they're not seeing the efforts, and they're not seeing the way the man perhaps is communicating that they are more emotionally available than they're given credit for. But I do think that there's some circumstances where there's a big deficit. There's a big deficit with the men for a number of reasons. And I think if you have more than one of these circumstances, like they were raised in a family that just ended up fostering a very avoidant attachment style, and then nobody was there to really talk to them about their feelings and help them understand that type of communication. They've got a few layers of complexity with that.
And do you find that there's like a certain, a lot of women maybe fall into this trap every now and again, is like where they're trying to like earn the love from an emotionally available man, and it becomes very addictive. Like just trying to get to crack the code of this individual becomes like this addictive process in and of itself. And so that when they finally do find somebody who's giving them that triangle we're talking about, where it's unfolding, it feels very like boring.
Yeah, that's possible as well. Yes, there's plenty, I think, of women who are very caught up in that effort that you're describing that can certainly feel addictive, and that they feel that their love can change them, or that they have the skill set to do something about it. Sometimes I think they're even just feeling sorry for the person, so they're saying like, I will nurse them to health, basically,
I will
which we
teach
know
this
doesn't
man
work. Yeah.
how to love.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the neurochemicals that you can feel from the intermittent reinforcement of somebody emotionally unavailable who is inconsistent, it just plays with your brain chemistry too. So that's another whole component of it. So yeah, there's the gamut of, the dating when you might be ghosted or breadcrumbed and looking for these early warning signs. And then there's being in a relationship. And Marni, you and I are both couples therapists. We'll hear some of the same things from women in our office, like, he doesn't open up to me. I feel so lonely. He's here, but I don't feel like anyone's here. Even when he talks, there's no depth to it. I try to share with him my emotions, but he's just totally shut off. And a lot of these men have learned these early tropes like, I'm a burden to my partner. I shouldn't put things on someone, sharing is bad. Or they'll say, why would I do that? It doesn't feel better to me
Or
to
it feels
talk about.
weak. I hear that a lot.
Right.
He'll see me as weak.
Right. Or I feel weak. Exactly. So that
Mm-hmm.
societal conditioning you describe is big.
Yeah.
And then what about the more toxic variants on the more narcissistic, maybe dark triad, manipulative end of the spectrum?
Yeah, this, of course, is a really, really difficult situation. And the women who usually find themselves in these relationships with men who may have narcissistic or antisocial traits are usually the most empathic women. So it's almost like they're drawn to each other like magnets and then drive each other crazy. So narcissistic men, we know, I learned a term. It's something, so it had something to do with how they often attract people to them before they even are known to that person. The term is called zero acquaintance. It just came to me.
Ooh, I've never heard of this.
Explain this.
This was a fascinating term. And this is because people who are narcissistic tend to be good looking. They're charming. They have this very interesting vibe about them. They draw people to them. They usually are very well groomed, right? So they're often good looking too. And so you could have that spark, or you feel that spark just with that person, and you're drawn to them before they open their mouth, before you know anything about them. And then once that happens, and then once you maybe have a date or two, they've drawn you in even more with their charm. So that could be super troubling, because for the woman, they're feeling that limerence, it's that sort of those feelings of lust or infatuation, and they label it love. And that's the other thing I find with that happens a lot with women, is they're labeling it love when it's really those early feelings and it's not yet love. So that's very problematic. So
It's limerence, not love.
Right. It's limerence. Exactly. It's not quite love, but in their heads, they're saying it is, which is a problem for them if that's the way they're labeling it.
Yes, and these rotten bastards with their good looks and well put together outfits
Yeah.
and their charisma. It is, I love this, zero acquaintance.
acquaintance.
Don't
Zero
even,
acquaintance.
yeah.
There's some
Is it
where I'm like,
conscious?
there's a
Is
word
it
for
like, is it,
No, I don't
I mean,
think
are these
so.
men like in the mirror going like, I'm going to have people attracted to me without even having to open my mouth. I'm just going to be a force field.
I
Maybe
think they
sometimes.
get used to it happening and they do like it. But again, once the where the the rubber meets the road and they have to start showing maybe something more than that, or the depth that is involved in a relationship, it's completely lacking. They can't do it. And worse than that, sometimes because they actually at their core feel a lot of shame and inferiority, they're going to do everything to bring the woman down. And so they're going to slowly start stripping the woman away of her, self-esteem. So it's a really bad circumstance. So a woman who has, maybe a stronger sense of self-esteem and confidence, and they do feel good about themselves, and they have more of a secure attachment style, they will often be able to, at that point, say, "You're not for me," and walk away.
Yeah.
But a lot of women don't do that. It's like they're in the clutches of that situation, and it's really hard for them to get out of.
The frog in boiling water. So, and can we go to, before we talk a little bit more about getting out of these situations, can we talk for a minute again about the woman involved with the married man that we mentioned at the beginning? And can you describe, because I think that can happen to more people. It's kind of like even with infidelity, 80 something % of people say they're completely morally opposed to infidelity. And we know from Shirley Glass's work, not
Right.
just Friends,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of times people are not setting out for these situations to
Right.
unfold. Again, I'm not excusing it. It is
Mm-hmm.
not the right
Mm-hmm.
choice. There are other ways to deal with your problems that
Right.
are not only, morally superior, but cause you less grief. But this does happen. So what's going on there? And you have some very, very straightforward advice to women who find themselves in these circumstances.
Yes. So you're correct in that a lot of times when the woman meets this particular man who's married, they don't know that they're married, and the guy is lying. So they say that they aren't, or they say that they're separated, or they really give a lot of stories, but it's completely not true. And with these situations, you could have a tremendous amount of chemistry, and then the guy is breadcrumbing and doing whatever it takes maybe to just keep stringing you along, and when you try to pull away, they just up the ante to keep you in. But they then will start to lie a lot. So that's also what I found. They will just say, well, I'm just waiting for my kid to be in high school or graduate high school, or I'm just waiting for this, or my wife has a terminal illness and she's going to die any minute now. Like, they're saying all sorts of things.
Or my wife's terrible. She doesn't understand me.
Yes,
Right.
they will describe horrible situations
Doesn't have
exactly
sex
at
with me
home.
anymore.
And it also preys on your sympathy. And again, women can be very sympathetic and empathetic. And so they're just kept in that circumstance. And the truth is, there's not a tremendous amount of research, but from what I read, the circumstances of the person actually leaving their spouse for the affair partner is extremely low, something like less than 5%. It's extremely, extremely low. And then if they do leave, the chances of that relationship working out is also extremely low. So you're looking at maybe like a 1% chance, and you're letting your life just fly by, and you're then not putting yourself in the path of maybe men who are available. So the circumstance is just awful. So in general, my advice is, unless you have like irrefutable proof that that guy is leaving the wife for you, leave. Just be done
Assume
with
he
it.
isn't going
Just
to.
be done. Assume it's never going to happen.
Get out. It's the road to misery.
To your point, Colette, about the bifurcated strategy, like some men live their whole lives in a bifurcated strategy. Like even what you were talking about in the book about how a lot of people love these like long distance relationship scenario, which is just another way of like gauging intimacy.
Yes.
So it's like we see each other on a weekend.
It's
it
hot,
seems to be heading somewhere, but it's like heading nowhere.
And there's a lot of passion when they are linking up and seeing each other. And because it's secretive, that adds to the whole passion of it all too.
Right. No one's farting next to you every night in bed.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You're not picking his underwear up off the floor and yeah, exactly.
Sorry, husband.
So they're showing you the best version of themselves.
Right.
So do I like understand it intellectually how a woman could get caught up with a man like this? I totally can understand it. They are giving you the best version of themselves in those moments. But it's not reality. It does also have an addictive quality to it as well.
Yep. And I want to add one thing to the married man thing that I've seen a lot in my office too, to add to your rare occasions, right? It's extremely rare that this man will ever leave his wife, no matter what he tells you. A. B, if he does, it's extremely rare. Like the studies I saw were that less than 3% of those relationships work out. And then when they do, I see, and I'm sure you see this too, Marni, I see these couples in my office and there is almost like a fundamental underlying mistrust. Because I'll say to people, if you've ridden a horse and one day you fall off the horse, your brain is never going to forget that you can fall off a horse. Maybe you choose to keep riding, but your brain always knows. Their brains always know what can happen. Their template is people can cheat under certain circumstances. So you're already disadvantaging the relationship to be very insecurely attached. And I see couples really struggle with that. So I loved seeing in the book that your advice is so straightforward. I think it's so helpful that, again, not condoning it, but let's normalize that this happens a lot more than anyone wants to admit. And if you find yourself in that situation, we're not saying it's easy, but really you got to get yourself out because it's not going to end well. Not to mention what could happen to your reputation or all of those other things if these affairs usually get discovered eventually.
Right. And also the other complications I think that end up happening is if you do end up with this person, their family isn't going to just accept you. Right. Like that guy's kids isn't just going to be like, yeah, another mom. I'm so happy.
Partner.
No fairy tale ending. Yes. It's really rough.
That's another great point that you then are going to struggle with the family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something else that I see too is like women who are with this like really charismatic guy who's like very intermittent. And they're like, you know how like monkeys they capture monkeys by like having them grab a hold of a banana and they won't let it go. And then the monkey just stays there. Like that's like the woman they say to me all the time, but he's going to change for someone. He's going to marry the next woman that comes along. And like they believe that like he'll change for the right person. I've been done all this work with this guy and then he's going to like the whole idea of the married man. Like I put all this time in. And he's going to marry the next woman that comes along. And it keeps them there. It's just sad.
Yeah, it is. It's very sad. And believe it or not, there's also been circumstances. In fact, I have a vignette in the book where somebody was in an affair with a married man for a while, single woman with a married man. And he did end up divorcing his wife, but then he dumped her too. So she was obviously serving some particular purpose, but that isn't who he ended up with or who he wanted. And that to me is so, heartbreaking. So yes, I'm pretty straightforward in the book. Like just don't do it. Just move on. Don't do it.
I'm so glad that you give that advice because I think it's really important. And really, you know, unless a man who's emotionally unavailable is willing to put in a lot of time and effort to doing his own work, most likely, even though you think, to Laura, your point about the banana, like he's going to do this for some woman, despite what you may see in the future on his highlight reel, he's most likely repeating the same
Yes.
pattern with the next woman of seeming
Yes.
fantastic at the beginning and then being
Right.
totally disconnected and unavailable. And so he's probably going to go on to make somebody else unhappy. And in the long run, you'll realize whatever ghosting, breadcrumbing, whatever drove you finally out did you a big favor.
Right, absolutely. No, I think you've got to reframe that, and you've got to focus on the future and not what just might have happened to you with that person. And there's a lot. It just, I think, in the mindset shift that, hey, that person was not for you. They weren't right for you. And yes, those feelings that you had were real. But regardless of the feelings, what is so much more important are all of the other things that make a healthy relationship, like being consistent and being present, creating emotional safety, being reliable, responsible. The problem that I, see in here, as I'm sure you both do, is sometimes those words are not synonymous with love and romance. They almost sound, like you said, either boring or you're just not feeling some kind of energy or something that you need to feel. And I think that really worries me about people. It worries me being that the divorce rate is still pretty high. It's still like 50%. So I really want people to pay attention to what goes on early and while they're dating. And dating is that phase that is supposed to be for you to really get to know somebody and get to know if they are right for you, and that they are checking the boxes that you have in your mind, usually around that, right? Around,
Right.
are they caring? Are they safe? Are they consistent? Are they reliable? Are they responsible? Are they accountable? Like, all of those things are what I would rather people think about. And do you have a shared value system? Are your core values in alignment? That's so much more important.
Does this relationship meet my needs? Does this work for me?
Yes.
Not so much, oh my God, do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me?
Right.
I mean, I can have a lot of compassion for myself for being drawn to this in my younger years. And I like to think that I've done the work to evolve out of it. But I've also been in a relationship now for 13 years with somebody who does not fit these things at all. But who knows if I were out there dating again? It can be very slippery and tricky. I think the key is that ideally what you're saying, let's pay attention to these early signs, not just the fireworks and chemistry, because we're choosing a life partner. And to some degree, healthy love is boring, but boring is actually safe and the pathway to emotional intimacy and really having a true partner in life, which in the long run isn't boring at all. It's just not chaos. Right? And that's very, very different. So you have this great acronym in the book too, Get Smart. And obviously you guys go get the book because we can't explain all of this in the short time we have, but give a little sense of what you're encouraging people to do in this process and how you help people in therapy. Laura already asked you about the beginning, but what does that look like?
Yeah. So I want people to think about goals in relationally too, not just goals for work or a hobby, right? Think about what you want and how you want to feel with somebody, and that if that person doesn't make you feel that way, and in your gut that something is off, that you've got to really pay attention to it. And so that's about like getting smart, tuning into that, maybe doing some therapeutic work. Again, if you find that it's a pattern, that you keep picking the same type, or you seem to have bad luck with every relationship, it may be worth getting an outside pair of eyes to kind of help you become aware of the signs, the patterns, what's going on, connecting those dots maybe around, some of the early established patterns in your family. I think that's like really important. And also developing more self-awareness. And we can do that in therapy. And then sometimes we can get feedback from other people. Like, think about people in your trusted circle. It might be a friend. It may not be a family member, but maybe a friend that you really trust and you think has themselves together and they've chosen a healthy partner. Maybe ask them for feedback. I think having some of these, being brave enough to have some of these conversations, I think is going to be really, really critical. So I think you can learn a lot about what not to do and the type of person to avoid. But I also have a chapter in the book that's titled Maybe It's You, because not to shame anybody, but I think you may need some insights about yourself and how you are putting yourself in some of these circumstances, possibly over and over. And I think that's going to be really important. So it's who you choose, but also about you and yourself and what version of you are you bringing into these circumstances.
Yes. And I see the women that because we're all going to interface. If you're out there long enough, you're going to, especially at this phase of life, there's a lot of these men floating around, right? Mm-hmm. It's about the women that look at it and they feel it in their bodies and they're like, this doesn't feel right. Like, this is not compatible with my nervous system. I can't do this. And they catch and release. And they release quickly, right? Like, back to my banana metaphor.
Yeah.
But it's like, can you get good at owning what fits for you? And this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to retrofit this man into something that's going to work.
Let
right,
some other woman
yes,
take that project. Because I guarantee it's not going to be fun.
Yes. You don't want a project. That was definitely my problem a lot as well. So I can totally relate to that. And the thing I also find, we're in helping professions. If you're in a helping profession, believe it or not, you're more likely to get involved with somebody who is a project or needs help or needs to evolve in some way, and you're going to step in and do it, or you're going to reparent them the way they should have been parented, however it is.
But or you make excuses for their deficient childhood. And exactly.
They're all dangerous circumstances. And I say just be very, very careful.
Yeah. So really having that self-awareness, looking at your patterns, like you said, Laura, catch and release. If you're out there dating, this is going to float by and you may find yourself tangoing with this dynamic more often than you'd like in the dating world. But can you identify it and feel how not good it feels in your nervous system and trust yourself, honor that? That's where you have to really choose yourself. We've all made these mistakes, even if it's years ago. I know you're both married a really long time. I just want to throw a shout out too for how hard it is when when you're what used to happen to me years ago when I was dating, I would know. But because we all have parts of self, parts of me would know. Mm-hmm. Other parts of me would be getting a lot of cookies from these dynamics that were very addictive. So I would resolve to be done. And then something would happen where this person, the push-pull dynamic, you withdraw. Some of these guys then start to pursue. And in fact, a lot of dating advice is make people chase you, which makes me cringe. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a degree of mystery or pursuit, but playing games to manipulate somebody so they come after you when the prize you're going to get in the long run is a lifetime of loneliness and emotional frustration. Not a game I want to sign up for anymore.
Right. I think people have to distinguish between what their feelings are about. And sometimes it's just attachment system activation.
Yes.
Right.
Meaning
and
something
dopamine
inside, is saying this is familiar. Yes. And it got paired with love. If a parent, let's say a woman's father, we'll say for ease of just an example, was an alcoholic and was very emotionally unavailable. And, that circumstance you might get into in dating feels the same. It feels comfortable. And so that got paired together or conflated with love, right? So your definition of love might be someone doesn't pay a lot of attention to you. Someone is absent. Somebody drinks or however it is. You've got to revise your definition. You've got to revise that. And a lot of times I'm just saying to people something like, just because you feel it doesn't make it so, or doesn't make it right for you. We need the rational part of the brain to talk to that emotional side to see what is really going on here. And let's make a good, deliberate decision that is healthy for you and doesn't just feel like home because it's what happened there.
Right. From your wisest, most adult self, not from an emotional part, not from a young part inside that just is drawn to what's familiar, because we're all going to have that. But we can outgrow our family of origin patterns by being self-aware and working through things.
Absolutely. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what I also impart in the book, that there is absolutely hope for you. If you're listening, there's a lot of hope and you can make these changes. I'm not going to say that they're easy, but luckily I think we have better science. We have better therapeutic methods. There's a lot available to people now that probably wasn't available long ago. And we know a lot more, and there's a lot more hard research about it. So know that you can make changes. You don't have to be doomed to just repeat these cycles over and over again.
That's such great advice to end on. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Marni. And can you tell everyone the name of your book again, and then how to find you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So the book is called Ghosted and Breadcrumbed: Stop Falling for Unavailable Men and Get Smart About Healthy Relationships. And it's available everywhere books are sold, and of course Amazon, and it's available on audio if you aren't into reading it. And I have two websites. One is drmarnieonline.com. That's all one word. And I have a checklist if anybody wants to get it. It's a free download to help you determine if you are in a relationship with an unavailable partner. So it's easy to find right on that website. And then my psychotherapy website is thetalkingsolution.com.
Great. And we'll put
Great.
links to everything in our show notes.
This has just been really helpful. I know I have several clients that really struggle with this, and I think it's just something that women can really begin to heal themselves and get into much, much better relationships that they deserve. So this is a huge resource. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I love talking about this topic, and it was so nice talking with the both of you about it. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, Marni. Thank you.